You need to find another roof to live under." The words hung in the dining room air, suspended between us like an unexploded bomb. My fork paused halfway to my mouth, a piece of roasted potato balanced precariously on its tines. For a moment, I couldn't process what my younger son had just said. "Excuse me?" I finally managed, setting my fork down beside the grilled salmon I'd spent an hour preparing to Alexander's exact specifications. Medium rare, no dill, extra lemon. "Mom, you know I've been seeing Vanessa for 3 months now." Alexander gestured toward the striking brunette beside him, whose crimson lips curved into what might generously be called a smile. "Things are getting serious, and we need our space." "In my house," I clarified, 40 years of maternal restraint keeping my voice steady. "It's basically been my house since Dad died." The casual dismissal of my ownership, both legal and emotional, was breathtaking. "You know I've always planned to take it over eventually. Vanessa has incredible ideas for renovating." Vanessa nodded enthusiastically. "The kitchen needs a complete overhaul. Those cabinets are so dated. And that master bedroom would make a perfect media room once we knock down the wall to—" "Once you knock down the wall to my bedroom?" I interrupted, something unfamiliar rising in my chest, not the accommodating warmth that had characterized my interactions with Alexander for decades, but a sharp, clarifying heat. Alexander had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before Vanessa squeezed his arm. Drawing strength from her touch, he straightened his shoulders and continued. "Mom, you're 70. Wouldn't you be happier in one of those nice senior communities? Meadowbrook Gardens has activities. People your age." He trailed off, apparently realizing the patronizing tone had crept into his voice. "I see." I dabbed my lips with my napkin, buying time as 40 years of accumulated resentment and sacrifice crystallized into sudden, perfect clarity. "And when exactly should I find another roof?" The question seemed to surprise them both. They'd clearly expected tears, protests, emotional manipulation, the tools I'd never used, despite Alexander's frequent accusations whenever I expressed the mildest disagreement with his plans. "Well, Vanessa's lease ends next month," Alexander replied, gaining confidence from my apparent compliance. "We thought that would be perfect timing for everyone." Perfect timing indeed, though not in the way they imagined. I suppressed the smile threatening to break through my composed exterior. "A month seems reasonable," I agreed mildly. "More than enough time for me to make arrangements." Alexander blinked, clearly thrown by my easy capitulation. "Really? That's great, Mom. I knew you'd understand once we explained." "Of course I understand." I rose from the table, gathering my plate though I'd barely touched my dinner. "Now if you'll excuse me, I have some calls to make." As I left the dining room, I heard Vanessa's poorly hushed whisper, "See? I told you she'd be fine with it. These old ladies just need a little push." In the kitchen, I scraped my lovingly prepared meal into the garbage disposal, an apt metaphor for decades of thankless sacrifice. My hands trembled slightly, not with fear or sadness, but with an emotion I hadn't permitted myself in years, righteous anger. I glanced at the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator, mentally calculating dates. The closing on the house sale was scheduled for next Thursday. The movers would come for my carefully selected possessions on Friday. My flight to Greece departed Saturday morning. The timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd orchestrated it myself, which, in fact, I had. 6 months ago, during one of Alexander's week-long business trips, that inevitably resulted in nothing but excuses and requests for more investment in his latest scheme, I had made a decision. After consulting with Marcus, my older responsible son from my first marriage, I had quietly listed the house with a discreet realtor who specialized in properties destined for redevelopment. The offer from Westbrook Developers had exceeded my expectations. $17 million for a property Alexander believed was worth perhaps $2 million. The money, combined with the fortune I'd built through 4 decades of careful investing, a talent neither of my sons knew I possessed, had allowed me to purchase my dream home, a stunning villa perched on the Santorini cliffs with an art studio overlooking the Aegean Sea. In my bedroom, I opened my laptop and checked my email. The final confirmation from my Greek property manager had arrived, all renovations completed, furnishings installed, everything ready for my arrival next week. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Alexander entered without waiting for a response, a habit he'd developed somewhere in his 30s when he decided my privacy was less important than his convenience. "Mom, I just wanted to make sure you're really okay with this," he said, concern finally creeping into his voice. "You seem to take it pretty well, but—" "I'm perfectly fine, Alexander," I assured him, closing my laptop with deliberate calm. "You're right. It's time for me to move on to the next chapter of my life." Relief washed over his features. "Great. And don't worry about money. I can probably spare a few $100 a month to help with rent once my new business partnership with Jason takes off." The business partnership I'd heard nothing about until this moment. The latest in a long line of get-rich-quick schemes that had consumed thousands of my dollars over the years. "That's very generous," I replied, the irony entirely lost on him. "But I believe I'll manage." As he left, satisfied with his own magnanimity, I turned back to the window overlooking the garden where Robert and I had once planted roses together, where Alexander had taken his first steps, where I had buried my dreams of pursuing my own art career to raise a son who now couldn't wait to claim what he'd always seen as his inheritance. One more week of pretense. One more week of playing the role I'd maintained for 40 years, the self-sacrificing mother, the background character in my own life story. Then, everything would change. If this story of family betrayal and shocking comeuppance has caught your attention, make sure to subscribe. What will happen when Alexander discovers the truth about the house he's always taken for granted? And what awaits Sophia in her secret new life? The revelations have only just begun. Over the next few days, Alexander and Vanessa transformed from cautious relief to unbridled enthusiasm, dropping all pretense of concern for my future. They roamed through my house, still legally my house for another 5 days, measuring spaces, discussing wall removals, and debating furniture placements as if I were already gone. "The dining set has to go," Vanessa declared one evening, running manicured fingers along the mahogany table where our family had shared meals for 30 years. "It's so heavy and traditional. We're thinking a glass and chrome concept for in here." I continued preparing their dinner, another meal they'd requested without offering to help, and smiled neutrally. It was an anniversary gift from Robert, imported from Italy. "Well, it definitely doesn't work with our aesthetic," she replied, dismissing 4 decades of memories with a flick of her wrist. "Maybe you could sell it? Help with expenses for your new situation." My situation. As if aging were a disease I'd contracted through carelessness. "Actually, I've already arranged for it to be shipped," I said mildly, "along with several other pieces." Alexander looked up from his phone with sudden interest. "Shipped where? You haven't mentioned where you're moving." "Because you haven't asked, I thought but didn't say." Instead, I offered the same vague response I'd been giving all week. "I'm still finalizing details, but don't worry, I'll be settled before your deadline." The doorbell chimed, saving me from further questioning. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to answer, knowing exactly who it would be. "Mrs. Hartwell?" A professionally dressed woman stood on my porch, clipboard in hand. "I'm Caroline from Preston Estate Appraisals. We have an appointment to evaluate your art collection." Alexander appeared in the hallway behind me, confusion evident on his face. "Art collection? What art collection?" I gestured for Caroline to enter. "Just some pieces I've acquired over the years. Nothing important." This, perhaps the greatest understatement of my life. The pieces were 43 original paintings, my own work, created in secret during early mornings and late nights over 4 decades. Paintings I'd hidden in the attic studio that Alexander had never bothered to explore, too consumed with his own pursuits to wonder how I spent my private hours. Last year, during one of his extended absences, I'd shown them to an art dealer in New York, a friend of Marcus's wife. Her stunned reaction had been the first external validation of the talent I'd suppressed for most of my adult life. The subsequent appraisal had valued my collection at just over $4 million. Now Carolyn followed me upstairs to the attic studio, where my life's hidden work awaited professional packing and shipping to Santorini. Alexander trailed behind, suddenly interested in his mother's activities now that they might have monetary value. "These are yours?" he asked, genuine shock in his voice as he surveyed the canvases lining the walls, vibrant seascapes, emotional portraits, abstract explorations of color and form that documented my unseen artistic evolution. "Yes," I replied simply. Caroline moved efficiently around the space, checking each piece against her inventory list. "Mrs. Hartwell, these will be crated tomorrow and shipped as arranged. The insurance documentation is complete based on the previous appraisal, though I must say, if anything, I believe these pieces may be undervalued in today's market. Alexander's expression transformed, confusion giving way to calculation as he processed the implications of appraisal and undervalued. "Mom, you never told me you were an artist," he said, his tone shifting to the wheedling quality I recognized from countless requests for money over the years. "These must be worth something if you're having them professionally shipped." "They have value to me," I replied, deliberately ambiguous. After Caroline departed, Alexander cornered me in the kitchen, Vanessa hovering nearby with poorly disguised interest. "Why didn't you tell me about those paintings?" he demanded. "If you're in some kind of financial trouble, we could sell them instead of you taking some minimum wage job at your age." The assumption that I'd need to work at 70, after decades of careful investing, was typical of Alexander's perception of me. Financially naive, professionally unskilled, existing solely to support his ambitions. "The paintings aren't for sale," I said firmly, "and my finances are perfectly in order." "But Mom—" "Alexander," I interrupted with uncharacteristic sharpness, "for 40 years I've respected your independence and choices, even when I disagreed with them. I'm asking for the same respect now." He retreated, momentarily chastened, but clearly unsatisfied. Later, I overheard him whispering with Vanessa in the living room. "There's definitely money there we didn't know about," he insisted. "Those paintings looked professional. And why else would she be so secretive about where she's moving?" "Maybe she's embarrassed," Vanessa suggested. "You know, about having to downsize to some tiny apartment after living here." Their speculation continued as I slipped upstairs to make final preparations. In my bedroom, I opened the hidden compartment in my jewelry box, a feature Alexander had never discovered despite borrowing from my emergency cash countless times over the years. Inside lay my most valuable possession, the key to my new life, not the deed to the Santorini villa, which was secured in a digital vault along with all my financial documentation, not the first-class plane ticket awaiting me at the airport, but a small, worn sketchbook, Robert's last gift before the accident that took him from us. Inside, on the first page, he had written, "To my Sophia, who put her dreams on hold to nurture mine and raise our son. Your art is too beautiful to remain hidden forever. Promise me you'll someday claim the life you deserve." For 33 years, I'd kept that sketchbook as a talisman, but ignored its message, trapped in the role of Alexander's support system while my own dreams gathered dust alongside my canvases. Robert's younger brother, Marcus Sr., had tried to intervene after the funeral, concerned about how completely I was sublimating my needs to Alexander's, but I'd been determined to compensate for the father my son had lost. Now, as I traced Robert's handwriting with my fingertip, I felt not guilt, but liberation. In 3 days, I would finally fulfill my promise to him and to myself. The sound of Alexander's laughter drifted up from below, followed by Vanessa's higher-pitched response. They were already planning their future in my house, blithely unaware that in less than a week they would be facing an eviction notice and the collapse of all their entitled assumptions. I should have felt remorse for the shock that awaited them. Instead, I felt only the lightness of approaching freedom, like a bird sensing the door of its cage slowly opening after a lifetime of captivity. The morning of my departure dawned with perfect symbolic clarity, heavy clouds giving way to brilliant sunshine as I packed the last of my personal items into a single suitcase. Everything else had already been shipped or strategically removed during Alexander's convenient 3-day business development retreat with his latest entrepreneurial partner. My timing had been meticulously planned. The movers had come and gone yesterday, efficiently packing the furniture and possessions I'd chosen to keep. Items Alexander and Vanessa had already mentally discarded, but which would soon grace my Santorini villa. The closing on the house had been completed via digital signature that same afternoon, ownership transferring cleanly to Westbrook developers without Alexander's knowledge. I'd left most of the furniture he'd grown up with, knowing it would be demolished along with the house in a matter of weeks. A small cruelty, perhaps, but one I couldn't bring myself to regret after overhearing him and Vanessa laughing about finally getting rid of all Mom's outdated junk. The doorbell rang at precisely 9 a.m. I opened it to find Marcus, my older son from my first marriage, standing on the porch with a gentle smile. "Ready for the great escape, Mom?" he asked, embracing me with genuine warmth. Unlike Alexander, Marcus had forged his own path without expecting me to finance or facilitate it. At 45, he had built a successful architectural firm, married a wonderful woman who treated me with respect, and raised 2 children who actually called their grandmother regularly. The contrast between my sons had become increasingly painful over the years, though I'd never admitted it aloud. "More than ready," I replied, allowing him to take my suitcase. "Is everything set on your end?" "All arranged. Eliza is excited to have you stay with us until your flight tomorrow. The kids can't wait to hear about Santorini." Marcus had been my confidant and supporter throughout this entire plan. Initially skeptical, "Mom, are you sure this isn't too drastic?" He had ultimately recognized the toxic pattern I needed to escape. His only condition had been that I let him handle certain logistics, unwilling to leave his mother completely without backup, despite agreeing with my decision. As we pulled away from the house that had been my home for 40 years, I felt a momentary pang. Not regret, exactly, but acknowledgement of everything those walls had witnessed. Robert's and my early marriage, Alexander's childhood, years of holiday gatherings and ordinary Tuesday evenings, the gradual erosion of my identity as I'd allowed myself to become Alexander's support system, rather than a woman with her own desires and ambitions. "You're doing the right thing," Marcus said quietly, reading my expression with the emotional intelligence Alexander had never developed. "He's 42, Mom. It's long past time for him to stand on his own feet." "I know," I sighed. "I just wish it hadn't come to this." "He gave you no choice." That comment about finding another roof, after everything you've done for him? I wanted to drive over and shake some sense into him. I smiled at my older son's protective instinct. Violence wouldn't solve anything. Besides, I think the universe is about to teach him a more effective lesson than you ever could. Marcus's expression shifted to one of grim satisfaction. "The notice will be delivered Monday morning. I've arranged for a courier service. Legally, they have 30 days, but since the developers are planning demolition, Alexander will have to figure it out," I finished firmly. "Just like I've had to figure out every aspect of adult life for him since he was 7. We spent the evening at Marcus's beautiful Georgetown home, where Eliza had prepared my favorite meal, and the grandchildren peppered me with questions about Greece. The contrast between this warm family dinner and the uncomfortable, entitled atmosphere Alexander and Vanessa had created in my own home was striking. "Show them the villa photos, Mom," Marcus encouraged after dinner, eyes twinkling with anticipation of the children's reaction. I opened my laptop and pulled up the images my Greek property manager had sent. Stunning views of whitewashed walls against the deep blue Aegean, an infinity pool seeming to merge with the sea below, spacious rooms filled with light, and the crowning glory, a professional art studio with north-facing windows and built-in storage for canvases. "Holy cow, Grandma!" My 16-year-old grandson's eyes widened. "That's not just a house, that's like a mansion." "It's beautiful," Eliza said warmly. "And so perfectly you, Sophia. I can absolutely see you painting in that studio." "That's the plan," I replied, surprised by the emotion swelling in my throat. 40 years of hidden artwork is enough. It's time to paint in the light. Later, as the household settled into evening routines, Marcus joined me on the back porch with 2 glasses of wine. "Have you told Alexander where you're going?" he asked. I shook my head. "He hasn't actually asked. Just assumed I'd be in some dreary senior apartment he could visit occasionally to assuage his conscience. And when he discovers the truth? About the house? About your finances? About Santorini?" I sipped my wine, considering. I imagine he'll be furious, then calculating. Then he'll convince himself he's entitled to a share of everything because he's my son. "And are you prepared for that? The emotional manipulation? The guilt trips?" "I've had 40 years of practice," I reminded him dryly. "Besides, there's an ocean between us now. It's harder to manipulate someone via international calling rates." Marcus chuckled, but remained serious. "Just remember, you're not alone in this, Mom. Eliza and I support you completely. It's past time you lived for yourself." The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect flying weather. As Marcus drove me to Dulles International Airport, I felt a curious lightness, as if gravity itself had less hold on me with each mile we traveled away from the house where I'd sublimated my identity for decades. At the first-class check-in counter, the attendant welcomed me with professional courtesy. "Greece for pleasure or business, Mrs. Hartwell?" I smiled, the truth feeling deliciously subversive after years of self-denial. Both, actually. I'm an artist relocating to Santorini permanently. The words, spoken aloud to a stranger, sent a thrill through me. Artist. Not just mother, not just widow, not just Alexander's convenient support system and unpaid housekeeper. Artist. Moving to Santorini. Permanently. Marcus hugged me tightly at the security checkpoint. Call when you land. And Mom? I'm proud of you. This takes courage. Thank you for understanding, I whispered against his shoulder. For seeing me as more than just your mother. You've always been more, he replied simply. I'm just glad you're finally seeing it too. As the plane lifted off American soil, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to fully embrace the truth. I wasn't running away from something. I was running toward myself. The first 3 days in Santorini passed in a dreamy haze of Mediterranean sunlight and newfound freedom. My villa, still an astonishing concept to associate with myself, exceeded even the photographs that had convinced me to purchase it sight unseen. Perched on the caldera's edge in a less touristy area between Imerovigli and Oia, the property offered both privacy and breathtaking panoramic views. 3 bedrooms, each with its own bath and balcony, a professional kitchen with stone countertops and high-end appliances I was eager to use for my own pleasure rather than Alexander's demanding palate. Multiple terraces for morning coffee or evening cocktails, and the studio, my studio, a light-filled sanctuary with storage for canvases, professional-grade supplies waiting in organized drawers, and windows framing the Aegean blue that would soon fill my work. Is everything to your satisfaction, Mrs. Hartwell? Nikos, my property manager, asked on the 3rd morning as he stopped by to check on my settling in. A dignified man in his 60s, he had handled all local arrangements with impressive efficiency. Beyond satisfaction, I assured him, offering coffee on the main terrace where bougainvillea cascaded over whitewashed walls. You've thought of everything. Your art shipment arrived this morning at the port. The crates will be delivered tomorrow, as scheduled. I smiled, anticipation fluttering in my chest. My paintings, no longer hidden in an attic, but soon to hang proudly on these sun-washed walls. Tangible evidence of the self I'd suppressed for decades. Has there been any contact from America? I asked, trying to sound casual. Nikos understood immediately what I meant. As part of my strategic planning, I had arranged for all communications regarding the house sale to route through his office rather than directly to me. Nothing yet, he confirmed, though I expect that will change soon. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone began to vibrate against the table. Alexander's name flashed on the screen. The first contact since I'd left a brief note explaining I had moved out early to avoid an emotional goodbye. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. Hello, Alexander. Mom, where are you? His voice held an unfamiliar edge of panic. I just got back from my business trip and the house is... Everything's gone. I sipped my coffee, taking my time before responding. Not everything. I left the furniture in your bedroom and the living room pieces you always liked. That's not... He paused, audibly struggling to control his tone. Mom, there's a weird notice taped to the front door. Something about new ownership and property demolition. Is this some kind of mistake? The moment had arrived sooner than expected. I gestured apologetically to Nikos, who nodded understanding and moved discreetly inside to give me privacy. It's not a mistake, Alexander. I sold the house to Westbrook Developers last month. The closing was completed 3 days ago. Silence stretched across the international connection, followed by a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. That's not possible. You couldn't have sold the house. It's mine, I finished firmly. The house has always been in my name alone. I purchased it with my inheritance after your father died, and the deed was never transferred or amended. But you always said... His voice rose, indignation replacing shock. You implied it would be mine. You knew I was counting on that house for my future. I closed my eyes briefly, remembering all the times I'd gently suggested he develop his own financial security rather than relying on an inheritance. All the career opportunities he'd abandoned because they required too much effort for too little immediate return. All the business ventures I'd reluctantly funded that had evaporated without explanation. I suggested many paths to secure your future, I replied evenly. You chose not to take them. That's not my responsibility anymore. Not your... He sputtered into incoherence before rallying. I'm your son. Of course it's your responsibility. Where am I supposed to live now? What about all my plans with Vanessa? You told me to find another roof, I reminded him, surprised by my own calm. I simply did the same for you. The fury in his response was incandescent. Obscenities I'd never heard from his lips, accusations of betrayal, abandonment, cruelty, threats of legal action, promises to contest the sale, vows to track me down wherever I was hiding. I let the tirade wash over me, recognizing the tantrum pattern established in his childhood. Emotional explosions designed to make me yield, to prioritize his comfort over my own boundaries. For 40 years, it had worked. Today, with 3,000 miles and a lifetime of deferred dreams between us, it finally failed. When he paused for breath, I spoke quietly but firmly. Alexander, the sale is legal and binding. The developers begin demolition in 30 days. I suggest you use this time to find alternative housing and reevaluate your life choices. This is insane. Where are you even staying? Some pathetic senior apartment while I'm being evicted from my home? I glanced around at my stunning terrace, at the infinity pool reflecting cloudless Aegean skies, at the private path winding down to a secluded beach, accessible only from my property. I've found suitable accommodations, I said mildly. Now, I have an appointment to keep. We can speak again when you're calmer. Don't you dare hang up on me. I demand to know where you are and what's happening with all the money from the house. That should rightfully be my inheritance. For a heartbeat, I considered telling him everything. About the villa, about my art, about the financial acumen I'd developed while he dismissed me as financially naive, about the fortune I'd quietly built while he borrowed small loans he never repaid. Instead, I simply said, "Goodbye, Alexander. I'll call again soon," and ended the connection. My phone immediately began vibrating with his callbacks. After the third attempt, I blocked his number. Temporarily, just enough to establish that his access to me was no longer automatic and unlimited. Nikos reappeared with tactful timing, bearing a fresh pot of coffee. "Family disagreements are difficult," he observed with diplomatic understatement. "Some more than others," I agreed, surprised to find my hands steady and my emotions calm. Where was the crushing guilt I'd anticipated? The maternal anguish at causing my child distress? Instead, I felt only clarity and a curious sense of peace, as if a chronic pain I'd grown so accustomed to that I no longer recognized it had suddenly lifted. "Your art studio has been prepared exactly to specifications," Nikos continued, wisely changing the subject. "Would you like to see the final arrangements before your shipment arrives tomorrow?" I rose from the table, deliberately leaving my phone behind. I would love that. After all, I have 40 years of creativity to unleash. As we walked through my new home toward the studio, messages continued to light up my abandoned phone, increasingly desperate texts from Alexander, confused inquiries from Vanessa, and finally, a simple supportive note from Marcus. "I'm guessing he found out. Stand your ground, Mom. You've earned this." For the first time in decades, I intended to do exactly that. "Absolutely magnificent, Mrs. Hartwell. Your use of light is extraordinary." Elena Papadakis, curator of a small but prestigious gallery in Oya, stood before one of my seascapes, her professional assessment sending a thrill of validation through me. After a week of settling into my villa and studio, I'd finally gathered the courage to invite her to view my collection, the first time I'd voluntarily shown my work to anyone besides Marcus's family and the New York dealer. "You're very kind," I murmured, decades of conditioning making it difficult to accept praise for this part of myself I'd hidden for so long. "I'm not being kind. I'm being accurate." Elena moved to another canvas, a study of shadow and reflection that had poured out of me during the dark months after Robert's death. "This piece particularly, the emotional complexity is palpable." "How long have you been painting?" "All my life," I answered honestly, though seriously, only in stolen moments for the past 40 years. "Stolen moments," she repeated thoughtfully. "Yet you've developed a cohesive style and extraordinary technical skill. Imagine what you'll create now, with unlimited time and this incredible studio." The concept still felt surreal. Unlimited time, uninterrupted creative flow, no meals to prepare for an ungrateful son, no household to manage for others' comfort while neglecting my own. "I've already started a new series," I admitted, gesturing toward the easel where a half-finished canvas captured the distinctive Santorini light on whitewashed architecture. The inspiration here is overwhelming. I would very much like to feature your work, Mrs. Hartwell. Perhaps a small exhibition to introduce you to the local art community. Nothing commercial initially, unless you're interested in selling. The offer was so unexpected that I laughed in surprise. An exhibition? Of my work? Absolutely. Your American perspective on Greek light is fascinating, and these earlier works, she gestured to the paintings from my hidden years, they tell a powerful story of a woman's constrained creativity finally breaking free. It's a narrative that resonates. As Elena departed with promises to send a formal proposal, I found myself standing alone in my studio, surrounded by tangible evidence of the self I'd sublimated for 4 decades. The self I was reclaiming with each passing day in Santorini. My phone, which I'd finally checked after 3 days of peaceful disconnection, showed 17 missed calls from Alexander, 5 from Vanessa, and numerous text messages ranging from rage to pleading. I'd responded only once, a brief message informing Alexander that I was safe, settled, and would contact him when I felt ready for further conversation. His reply had been instantaneous and revealing. "Where are you? I need to know right now. The developers won't extend the eviction deadline, and Vanessa is threatening to leave if I can't provide proper housing. You owe me this information." I hadn't responded, recognizing the familiar pattern of his emergencies becoming my responsibility. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander would have to solve his own housing crisis. Now, energized by Elena's unexpected validation of my artistic worth, I decided it was time to check in with my other son. I settled on my favorite terrace with a glass of crisp local wine and connected to Marcus via video call. His familiar face appeared on screen, warm smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Mom, you look absolutely radiant. Santorini clearly agrees with you." "It does," I agreed, angling the phone to show him the sunset view behind me. "I feel like I'm finally breathing after decades underwater." "I can see it. You look younger already." His expression turned more serious. "I assume you've heard from Alexander?" "Multiple attempts at contact," I confirmed, though nothing constructive, just demands and emotional manipulation. Marcus sighed, running a hand through hair that was beginning to silver at the temples, a distinguished look that suited his thoughtful demeanor. "He showed up at my office yesterday, absolutely livid, ranting about how you'd abandoned him and stolen his inheritance." I winced, despite myself. "I'm sorry he dragged you into this." "Don't apologize. I've been waiting years for you to establish proper boundaries with him." Marcus's directness was refreshing after Alexander's emotional gymnastics. He demanded to know where you were, insisted I must have helped you hide assets from him. "And what did you tell him?" "That you're a grown woman entitled to your privacy and financial independence, and that perhaps this was an opportunity for him to develop some independence of his own." I could imagine Alexander's reaction to that suggestion. I'm guessing he didn't take it well. Let's just say security had to escort him from the building. Marcus's wry tone conveyed volumes. "He's spiraling, Mom. Vanessa apparently expected to move into a mortgage-free house, and now that plan's evaporated. Their relationship seems to be following suit." I sipped my wine, absorbing this information with surprising equanimity. "He's 42, Marcus. Old enough to manage relationship disappointments and housing transitions." Exactly what I told him. He acted like I'd suggested he sprout wings and fly. Marcus shifted, adjusting his phone to better frame his face. "But enough about Alexander's dramatics. Tell me about you. How's the art coming along?" For the next 20 minutes, I shared my experiences with genuine enthusiasm. The gallery curator's visit, my new painting series, the local artists I'd begun meeting through community connections. As I spoke, I realized I'd said more words about my own interests and activities in this one conversation than I probably had in years of interactions with Alexander, where my role had been primarily to listen and support. "You know what I'm hearing in your voice?" Marcus asked when I finally paused. "Joy. Authentic joy. Do you know how long it's been since I've heard that from you?" The observation brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Too long," I admitted. "I lost myself somewhere along the way, trying to be everything for Alexander that he lost when Robert died." "You did your best by both of us," Marcus said gently. "But it's your time now, and I couldn't be happier that you're claiming it." After we disconnected, I remained on the terrace as twilight deepened into night, stars emerging in the clear Aegean sky with breathtaking clarity. My villa, still a startling concept to associate with myself, glowed with warm light behind me, the infinity pool illuminated to mirror the constellations above. My phone chimed with an incoming email. Alexander again, this time from his work address, likely assuming I'd blocked his personal account. Mom, this has gone far enough. I've been patient with whatever midlife crisis you're experiencing, but reality has to set in sometime. Westbrook is serious about this demolition timeline. I have nowhere to go. Vanessa left yesterday, said she didn't sign up for this kind of instability. You've completely ruined everything I was building with her. I don't know where you're hiding, but this selfish behavior has to stop. You can't just abandon your family and responsibilities on some whim. I need you to contact Westbrook immediately and reverse this sale. Whatever independence game you're playing isn't worth destroying your son's life over. Call me immediately. This is an emergency. I read the message twice, noting the familiar triggers designed to activate my maternal guilt and sense of responsibility. The assumption that his housing and relationship problems constituted emergencies requiring my intervention. The complete absence of concern for my well-being or curiosity about my new life. For 40 years, such messages would have sent me scrambling to solve Alexander's problems, to smooth his path regardless of personal cost. Tonight, sitting beneath Santorini stars with the taste of excellent wine still on my lips and gallery exhibition plans taking shape in my mind, I finally recognized his communications for what they were. Not requests for help, but demands for continued sacrifice. I closed the email without responding and opened my camera instead, capturing the breathtaking night view from my terrace. After a moment's consideration, I sent the photo to Marcus with a simple caption, "My new normal, worth every moment it took to get here." His reply came seconds later. "Absolutely stunning. You deserve every inch of that view, and all the peace that comes with it." Peace. Yes. That was the unfamiliar sensation I'd been experiencing. Not just freedom from Alexander's constant demands, but deeper peace within myself. Permission to exist as a complete person with desires and talents beyond motherhood. Recognition that the best gift I could give my younger son now was the opportunity to finally grow up, even if the process would be painful for both of us. I returned to my studio, drawn to the half-finished canvas awaiting my attention. As midnight approached, I found myself painting with uninhibited joy, capturing the transformative Santorini light that seemed to illuminate not just the landscape, but my long-dormant sense of self. 1 month into my Santorini rebirth, life had settled into a rhythm that still felt miraculous in its simplicity. Mornings began with coffee on the eastern terrace, watching sunrise paint the caldera in gold and rose. Middays were devoted to painting in my studio, often losing track of time as creative energy flowed uninterrupted. Evenings brought exploration. Small tavernas where owners now greeted me by name, hidden beaches accessible from my private path, the growing circle of expatriate artists and local residents who had welcomed me with unexpected warmth. I was savoring a late lunch at my favorite cliffside restaurant when my phone vibrated with an incoming call from Marcus. Unusual, as we typically scheduled our conversations to accommodate the time difference. "Marcus, is everything all right?" His voice carried a note of warning. "Mom, I wanted to give you a heads up. Alexander managed to get your location out of Eliza's mother at a family function last weekend. He was asking about your senior living situation, and she innocently mentioned how excited we all were about your gorgeous Santorini villa. And I'm so sorry. It's not your fault," I assured him, though my stomach tightened at the implications. I knew he'd discover the truth eventually. Well, eventually might be sooner than you think. He stormed out of the gathering after that revelation, and this morning my assistant mentioned he was asking about flights to Greece. I think he may be on his way to confront you in person. I thanked Marcus for the warning and finished my meal in thoughtful silence. The confrontation I'd been postponing was apparently coming to my doorstep, literally. Part of me had known this was inevitable. Alexander had never accepted boundaries or disappointments gracefully. Back at the villa, I mentioned the situation to Nikos during his regular check-in, somewhat embarrassed to be involving him in family drama. Perhaps additional security measures would be prudent, he suggested without judgment. Not that I anticipate violence, but privacy protection might be valuable during a difficult conversation. His calm practicality steadied me. Together, we arranged for the villa's security system to be activated, and for staff to be present during daytime hours for the coming week. Not obvious security, but witnesses whose presence might encourage better behavior from my son. The preparations proved prescient. 2 days later, as I worked in my studio capturing the particular quality of afternoon light on the Aegean, Elena called from the gallery in Oya. "Mrs. Hartwell, I apologize for the intrusion, but there is an American man here asking about you quite insistently. He claims to be your son, and seems agitated. He found your paintings in our back room being prepared for the exhibition." Alexander. Of course he would track me through my art rather than approaching directly. Always looking for leverage, for ways to catch me off guard. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I promised, quickly changing from my paint-splattered smock into a simple linen dress. I'd face this confrontation on my terms, in public, with the gallery's staff as buffer. The drive to Oya along winding Caldera roads gave me time to prepare mentally. This wasn't the familiar terrain of our family home where Alexander controlled the emotional environment. This was my new world, where I stood on solid footing as an independent woman and emerging artist. I spotted him immediately upon entering the gallery, taller than the tourists examining displayed artwork, his impatient posture radiating tension as he spoke with increasingly animated gestures to Elena. He hadn't noticed me yet, giving me a moment to observe him undetected. He looked disheveled, as if he'd come directly from the airport without bothering to change or rest. Designer clothes that had once signaled success now seemed rumpled and incongruous against the gallery's whitewashed simplicity. In this setting, Alexander's cultivated image of sophisticated entrepreneur appeared exactly what it was, a carefully maintained facade hiding a man who had never actually built anything substantial. "Alexander," I said quietly, moving toward them. He whirled, eyes widening as they took in my appearance, tanned, relaxed, dressed simply but elegantly in a way that reflected my new environment rather than the maternal role he expected. "Mom?" Disbelief colored his voice. "What the hell is going on? You look different." "I am different," I acknowledged. "Elena, thank you for calling. My son and I need to talk privately. Perhaps we could use your office?" She nodded graciously, directing us to a small but lovely room at the gallery's rear, overlooking the sea. As the door closed behind us, Alexander's controlled facade crumbled. "What is this?" he demanded, gesturing wildly toward the gallery. "Paintings? A Greek island? You're living in some multi-million-dollar villa while I've been evicted from my home? How could you do this to me?" The familiar pattern, his problems automatically becoming my responsibility, his disappointments framed as my deliberate cruelty. For 40 years, this approach had worked for him, triggering my guilt and need to protect him from discomfort. Today, seated in a chair facing him directly, rather than scrambling to appease, I simply asked, "Is that really your question, Alexander?" Not, "How are you, Mom?" or "What have you been doing with your life?" but immediately how your circumstances are my fault. He blinked, momentarily derailed by my calm response. "That's not, I didn't mean," he regrouped quickly. "Fine. How are you?" "Apparently fantastic, living in luxury while your son is couch surfing with increasingly impatient friends." "I am well," I replied evenly, "building a new life that brings me joy after decades of putting others' needs before my own. And yes, I'm living comfortably, with money I earned and saved, while simultaneously financing your endless, temporary setbacks and business opportunities. So this is punishment? For asking you to move out and give me space with Vanessa?" His tone shifted to wounded innocence. "That was about creating my future, Mom. I didn't realize you'd take it so personally." "This isn't punishment, Alexander. It's consequence. For both of us. You, for decades of entitled dependence, and me, for enabling it." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "You told me to find another roof. I did. The fact that my choice was beyond your imagination reflects your perception of me, not my actual capabilities." He paced the small office, running hands through disheveled hair. "But why didn't you tell me? About selling the house? About having money? About—" He gestured toward the gallery. "Whatever this art thing is, we could have worked something out that benefited both of us." The revealing phrase hung between us. Benefited both of us. In Alexander's worldview, any good fortune coming my way should automatically be shared with him, or more accurately, redirected to him. "I didn't tell you because I knew exactly how you would react," I said quietly. You would have seen my resources as solutions to your problems, rather than the means for me to finally build my own life. You would have felt entitled to input or control over my decisions. You would have expected me to prioritize your comfort over my own dreams, exactly as you've done your entire adult life. That's not fair. I never— Alexander, I interrupted gently, when was the last time you asked about my dreams, my interests, what I wanted from my remaining years? Can you even name what I studied in college before giving it up to raise you? His expression confirmed what I already knew. Despite living with me for 40 years, Alexander had never truly seen me as a complete person, separate from my usefulness to him. I was an art major, I supplied into his telling silence, with a minor in business administration that I put to use managing our family finances after your father died. I've been painting in secret for 40 years and investing successfully for just as long. I sold the house for $17 million, significantly above market value, and purchased this villa with a portion of those proceeds combined with my investment portfolio. His eyes widened at the figures, mental calculations visibly racing behind his expression. 17 million? And you didn't think to share that with your only child? Your family? You are my son, Alexander, and I love you, but you are not entitled to my money, my home, or control over my life choices. I rose from my chair, suddenly weary of the conversation. I gave you 40 years of unconditional support. I'm not abandoning you now, but I am requiring that our relationship evolve into something healthier for both of us. Healthier? He laughed bitterly. I'm basically homeless. Vanessa left me. My latest business partnership collapsed when I couldn't provide the investment capital I'd promised. How exactly is any of this healthier? I moved toward the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. You're experiencing the natural consequences of choices you've made, Alexander. That's not abandonment. It's reality. At 42, it's long overdue. So that's it? You're just going to leave me to drown while you live in paradise? The naked manipulation in his tone, so familiar, so historically effective, washed over me without finding purchase. No, Alexander. I'm going to let you learn to swim on your own, finally. It's the one gift I should have given you years ago. I opened the door to find Elena waiting discreetly nearby. My son will be leaving now. I'll return tomorrow to continue our exhibition preparations. Alexander followed me out of the gallery onto the narrow, tourist-filled street, voice rising with frustration. You can't just walk away from this conversation. We're not finished. Actually, we are, I replied calmly. If you'd like to have dinner before your return flight, I can recommend several excellent restaurants. Otherwise, I wish you a safe journey home. Home? He sputtered incredulously. What home? You sold my home. Several tourists turned to observe the unfolding drama, their curious gazes adding to Alexander's discomfort. Public emotional displays had never been his style. He preferred private manipulation where witnesses couldn't judge his behavior. I met his gaze directly. 40 years of suppressed truth finally emerging in measured tones. I sold my home, Alexander, just as I've reclaimed my life. I suggest you start building your own instead of expecting to inherit one fully formed from your mother's sacrifices. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing speechless on the cobblestone street as I slipped into my waiting car. Through the rearview mirror, I watched his figure grow smaller. A middle-aged man suddenly facing the reality that his safety net had not only disappeared, but had transformed into a woman with boundaries and dreams of her own. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, perhaps the most honest interaction we'd had since he was a child. Whether it would lead to growth or deeper resentment remained to be seen. For now, I turned my car toward home, my real home, earned through decades of patience and newly claimed with hard-won courage. Whatever storms Alexander might continue to create, my foundation finally stood on solid ground. The evening after Alexander's unexpected appearance at the gallery, I returned to find my villa illuminated against the deepening twilight, a vision of serenity that still caught my breath each time I approached. Inside, Maria, the local woman who helped with housekeeping twice weekly, had left a simple dinner of grilled fish, fresh vegetables, and crusty bread warming in the oven, along with a note mentioning that a very agitated American man had come to the gate earlier, demanding entry. So Alexander had found my home after all. Not surprising, Oya was a small community, and my purchase of the villa had been noteworthy enough to be remembered by locals who might direct a searching son. The villa's security system showed no further attempts at entry, and calls to my phone had gone directly to voicemail as I'd silenced it after our confrontation. Part of me expected Alexander to simply appear again, perhaps scaling the walls dramatically like a character in one of the action movies he'd loved as a teenager. But the evening passed in tranquil solitude as I dined on my favorite terrace, watching stars emerge above the caldera while processing the day's emotional upheaval. I'd held firm during our confrontation, maintaining boundaries that would have been unthinkable mere months ago. Yet now, in the quiet aftermath, doubts crept in like evening shadows lengthening across my terrace. Had I been too harsh, too direct after decades of cushioning Alexander from life's harder edges? Was I overcorrecting now, swinging from excessive nurturing to cold detachment? Sleep eluded me that night, my mind replaying moments from Alexander's childhood when I might have established healthier patterns. The first time I'd completed his science project while he played video games, setting the precedent that his responsibilities would magically be fulfilled by maternal intervention. The high school years when I'd written excuse notes for unfinished homework, negotiated with teachers for extended deadlines, run interference with any authority figure who attempted to hold him accountable. Robert had tried to warn me before his death. "You're not helping him by removing every obstacle, Sophia," he'd cautioned during one of our last conversations. "Children need to develop resilience through manageable challenges. Alexander needs to learn that actions have consequences." I dismissed his concerns, convinced that my extraordinary support was necessary compensation for the father Alexander would lose too young. In my grief-fueled determination to protect my son from further pain, I'd inadvertently handicapped his development of the very qualities he would need most as an adult: self-reliance, perseverance, emotional regulation, and realistic self-assessment. Morning found me exhausted, but resolved. After coffee, I checked my phone to find multiple missed calls from Alexander, 2 from Marcus, and a text from an unknown Greek number that proved to be from Nikos. "Your son attempted entry at 2 a.m. Security protocol activated. No breach. We'll discuss additional measures when convenient." I called Marcus first, knowing his perspective would help ground me before dealing with Alexander. "How bad was it?" he asked immediately, concern evident in his voice, despite the transatlantic connection. The confrontation itself was about what you'd expect: accusations, guilt tactics, entitlement. Apparently, he tried to access the villa afterward, though security kept him out. Marcus sighed heavily. "I wish I could say I'm surprised. Do you feel unsafe? Should I fly out there?" The offer warmed me despite my conviction that Alexander's behavior, while disturbing, wasn't physically threatening. "I'm fine, truly. Just processing. It's strange finally standing my ground after a lifetime of yielding." "Overdue," Marcus corrected gently. "And necessary for both of you. Have you spoken to him since yesterday?" "Not yet. I needed time to think clearly without his emotional manipulation clouding my judgment." "Wise," he approved. "Just remember, you're not responsible for fixing his life. You never were, but especially not now at 70. His housing crisis, his failed relationship, his stalled career. Those are his problems to solve as a fully grown adult." After reassuring Marcus that I was safe and supported, I prepared myself to contact Alexander. Before I could dial, however, my phone rang with his number. "I need to talk to you," he said immediately, without greeting. His voice sounded rough, as if he'd been either drinking or crying. Perhaps both. "In person, not in some public gallery where you can just walk away." "Good morning to you too, Alexander," I replied, deliberately calm. "I'm willing to meet, but there will be conditions. No yelling, no accusations, no demands for money. If you can agree to those terms, you're welcome to come to the villa this afternoon." A pause, then. "Fine. Whatever. Text me the address." He disconnected abruptly. I spent the morning in my studio, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of brush on canvas. The painting taking shape beneath my hands reflected my emotional state. Turbulent seas meeting solid cliffs, darkness and light in dynamic tension, beauty emerging from the collision of opposing forces. Nikos arrived at noon to discuss security concerns, his practical approach reassuring. "We've enhanced the surveillance system and alerted local authorities to the situation," he explained. "I'll remain on property during your visitor's time here today, discreetly available if needed." His matter-of-fact handling of the situation helped me recognize that my circumstances weren't unique. Other women had established boundaries with difficult family members. Other mothers had faced entitled adult children. I wasn't pioneering some unprecedented territory, but simply joining countless others who had eventually said, enough, to unhealthy relationship patterns. Alexander arrived precisely at 2, driven by a local taxi that departed immediately, leaving him standing at my gate with a single overnight bag, a presumptuous suggestion that he expected accommodation. The security camera showed him taking in the villa's impressive exterior with an expression that cycled through disbelief, resentment, and calculation before settling into a carefully composed neutral mask. I met him at the gate myself, deliberately choosing not to invite him through the house to the ocean-facing terraces that showcased the property's most spectacular features. Instead, I led him to a small courtyard garden, beautiful, but more modest, less likely to inflame his sense of injustice at my extravagant living situation. "You actually live here," he stated flatly, as he took the offered seat at the stone table where I'd arranged for coffee and simple refreshments. "This isn't just some temporary rental to prove a point. This is my home now," I confirmed, pouring coffee into delicate cups that had been among my carefully selected shipments from America. "I purchased it outright 4 months ago, with money you never told me about." The accusation hovered between statement and question. "With money I earned and saved over 40 years, yes." I met his gaze directly. Money that was always mine to use as I chose. He looked away first, fingers drumming restlessly against the stone tabletop. "Do you have any idea what you've done to my life? I'm staying in a hostel, Mom. A hostel. At 42. All my stuff is in storage that I can barely afford. Vanessa is completely gone. Blocked my number after I had to admit there would be no house to renovate. The familiar pattern, listing his problems with the clear expectation that I would solve them. For decades, this approach had worked flawlessly. Today, it met with simple acknowledgement rather than immediate rescue. "That sounds very difficult," I said quietly. "What plans have you made to address your situation?" The question visibly startled him. "Plans? I've been in crisis mode since discovering my own mother sold my home out from under me. There hasn't exactly been time for strategic planning. It wasn't your home, Alexander. It was always my house that you were welcome to share." The gentle correction clearly stung, but I continued. "And it's been over a month since you received the eviction notice. That seems like sufficient time to begin developing alternatives." He stared at me as if I'd started speaking a foreign language, unable to process this new reality where his problems weren't automatically mine to solve. When he finally spoke, his voice held a vulnerability I hadn't heard since childhood. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom. Everything's falling apart. I always thought, that the house would be your safety net," I finished when he trailed off. "That regardless of how your business ventures or relationships turned out, you'd always have that valuable property to fall back on." He nodded, an unexpected moment of honesty breaking through his defensive anger. "I never imagined you'd sell it. Never thought you'd just leave, move to another continent without even telling me. Just as I never imagined you'd tell me to find another roof after 40 years of placing your needs above my own," I countered, not unkindly. "We've both had our assumptions challenged, it seems." His gaze traveled over the villa's elegant facade, the carefully tended garden, the glimpse of sea visible beyond. "So this is your life now. Art exhibitions, beachfront property, free from the burden of your dependent son." "This is my life now," I agreed, ignoring his attempt to characterize my liberation as abandonment. "At 70, I've finally created space to pursue my own passions and purpose after decades of supporting yours." Something shifted in his expression, perhaps the first glimmer of recognition that I existed as a separate person with my own valid desires and dreams. It vanished quickly, replaced by the more familiar calculation. "So where does that leave me? You've clearly got money. This place must have cost millions. Are you really going to let your only child struggle while you live in luxury?" And there it was, the core belief that had shaped our dysfunctional dynamic for decades. In Alexander's worldview, my resources existed primarily for his benefit. My comfort was negotiable. His was paramount. My dreams could wait. His demanded immediate funding. "Alexander," I said carefully, "I'm not going to give you money to maintain the lifestyle you've grown accustomed to without effort on your part. That wouldn't help either of us." His face hardened. "So you're cutting me off completely?" After a lifetime of promising to always be there for me, I am still here for you, as a mother who loves you, not as an ATM or safety net. I reached across the table to touch his hand, which he immediately withdrew. I'm willing to help you develop the skills to support yourself. I'll pay for therapy, career counseling, educational programs, whatever you need to build genuine independence. Therapy? He scoffed. I need a place to live, not some shrink telling me my problems are because you coddled me too much as a child. The irony of his statement almost made me smile, despite the tension. Then let's start there. I'll cover first and last month's rent on a modest apartment while you secure steady employment. After that, the finances will be your responsibility. The offer, generous by any reasonable standard, but far less than the blank check he'd clearly hoped for, was met with visible disappointment. That's it? After selling my childhood home for $17 million? Our childhood home, I corrected gently. And yes, that's my offer. Take some time to consider it. You're welcome to stay in Santorini for another day or two if you'd like, though I've arranged accommodation for you at a nearby hotel, not here at the villa. His expression darkened. So, I'm not welcome in your new life. Message received. You're welcome in my life, Alexander. Just not on the terms you've grown accustomed to. I rose from the table, signaling the end of our conversation. The hotel has your reservation. We can speak again tomorrow when we've both had time to reflect. As he departed, shoulders stiff with resentment, overnight bag clutched like a shield, I watched from my garden with a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for the healthy relationship we might have had if I'd established appropriate boundaries decades earlier. Guilt for my role in creating his dependent mindset, but also pride in finally standing firm, in valuing my own needs enough to insist on healthier patterns despite his resistance. The path forward remained unclear, but for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't automatically placing Alexander's comfort above my own well-being. Whatever happened next, that fundamental shift represented growth for us both, however painful the adjustment might be. Alexander departed for his hotel without further argument, leaving me alone with swirling thoughts and the whispered reassurance of Aegean waves against the cliffs below my villa. Despite maintaining composure during our conversation, I found myself emotionally drained. The accumulated weight of 40 years of maternal accommodation suddenly lifted, but leaving unexpected muscle aches in its absence. I retreated to my studio, seeking solace in the meditative act of mixing colors and applying brush to canvas. As twilight deepened into night, I painted without conscious direction, allowing decades of suppressed emotions to flow through my hands. The resulting image surprised me. A small boy with Alexander's features standing alone on a vast shore, looking lost yet defiant as waves threatened to engulf him. My phone chimed with a text from Nikos. Your son has checked into Hotel Atlantis as arranged. Security confirms no attempts to return to Villa. All secure for the night. I thanked him for the update, relieved that Alexander had accepted the hotel accommodation rather than creating a scene or attempting to force his way back into my home. Perhaps this represented progress, a small step toward accepting new boundaries after a lifetime without them. Sleep came fitfully that night, dreams populated with fragments from Alexander's childhood, his 7th birthday, weeks after Robert's death, when I'd transformed our backyard into an elaborate pirate adventure to distract him from grief he was too young to fully process. His high school graduation, where I'd watched with mingled pride and concern as he accepted his diploma with the casual entitlement of someone who expected life to continue providing rewards for minimal effort. The day he'd moved back home at 28 after his first serious relationship collapsed, explaining that he just needed some time to regroup, while I silently rearranged my life to accommodate his indefinite return. Morning arrived with clarity that had eluded me during the night. After coffee on my eastern terrace, watching sunrise paint the caldera in shades of gold and rose, I placed a call to Marcus, my emotional compass during this turbulent transition. He's still in Santorini, Marcus asked after I'd summarized yesterday's conversation. I'm surprised he didn't immediately fly home to continue the wounded victim narrative with friends. He may yet, I acknowledged, though I'm not sure where home is for him now. Without the house, without Vanessa, without you as his safety net, Marcus finished gently, which is precisely the reality he needs to face at 42. I keep questioning whether I'm being too harsh. After supporting him unconditionally for so long, this boundary feels almost cruel in comparison. Marcus's response was characteristically thoughtful. Mom, there's a concept in psychology called appropriate discomfort. It's the idea that growth requires facing challenges that stretch us without breaking us. You protected Alexander from appropriate discomfort his entire life. Now he's experiencing it all at once, which feels catastrophic to him, but is actually the catalyst he's needed for decades. I enabled his dependence, I admitted, the painful truth easier to acknowledge with Marcus than with Alexander himself. I thought I was being a good mother by removing obstacles, but I was actually preventing him from developing resilience. You did what you thought was right after Dad died, Marcus said, using the term he'd always applied to Robert despite their lack of biological connection. You were parenting from grief and fear, trying to protect Alexander from further pain. Your intentions were loving, even if the outcomes proved problematic. His compassionate framing eased something tight within my chest. When did you get so wise about family dynamics? Probably around the time I realized I needed therapy to process my own feelings about how differently you parented Alexander and me, he replied with surprising candor. Don't misunderstand. I've made peace with it. I recognize that losing his father at 7 created vulnerabilities that your protective instincts responded to, and in many ways, your expectations of independence served me well in adulthood. The revelation struck me with unexpected force. I'd always known I'd parented my sons differently, but had never fully acknowledged the potential impact on Marcus, the child who had received less coddling, fewer second chances, higher expectations of self-sufficiency. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I never meant to make you feel less important or less loved. I know that now, he assured me. And honestly, Mom, watching Alexander struggle with basic adult responsibilities while I built my own career and family helped me recognize that your so-called favoritism toward him actually disadvantaged him in profound ways. Your higher expectations of me became my strength. We talked for nearly an hour, the conversation shifting from Alexander's situation to deeper reflections on our family patterns, things we'd never discussed so openly before my move to Santorini. Another gift of my liberation, the space to develop more authentic relationships with both my sons, though in dramatically different ways. After our call ended, I prepared for the meeting Alexander had requested for that afternoon, another conversation at my villa that I anticipated would be equally challenging, but perhaps more productive than yesterday's initial confrontation. To my surprise, he texted suggesting we meet instead at a small cafe near his hotel, neutral territory that indicated at least some reflection on his part. The cafe overlooked a less touristed section of Oya's winding pathways, its terrace offering privacy without isolation. Alexander was already seated when I arrived, his appearance notably improved from yesterday, freshly showered, wearing clean clothes, a notebook open on the table before him. The unexpected sign of preparation caught me off guard. I ordered coffee, he said by way of greeting. The waiter said it might be a few minutes. I settled across from him, noting subtle changes in his demeanor, less combative, though tension still radiated from his posture. Thank you for suggesting this place. It's lovely. An awkward silence stretched between us before Alexander cleared his throat. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about what you said regarding the house always being yours, not mine to expect as inheritance. I nodded, waiting rather than rushing to fill the uncomfortable pause as I might have done automatically in the past. I looked up property records online, he continued, gesturing toward his phone. The house was always solely in your name, just like you said. I don't know why I assumed. He trailed off, then corrected himself. Actually, that's not true. I know exactly why I assumed it would eventually be mine. Because you always gave me everything I wanted or needed. You always fixed everything. I came to expect it. The self-awareness in his statement, however begrudging, represented a significant shift from yesterday's entitled demands. I acknowledged this growth with a simple, yes, that's accurate. Our coffee arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the intensity of the conversation. Alexander added sugar to his cup with deliberate focus, clearly gathering his thoughts. I called Vanessa last night, he said finally. Thought maybe if I explained about your villa, about the potential inheritance I might still receive someday. He shook his head ruefully. She laughed, said she wasn't interested in potential future payouts from my mommy, and suggested I grow up and get a real job like everyone else. The hurt in his voice was genuine, though I noticed it stemmed more from wounded pride than genuine loss of a loving relationship. Vanessa had clearly been attracted to what Alexander could provide materially, just as he had been attracted to her beauty and status value rather than deeper connection. That must have been painful to hear, I offered, neither dismissing his feelings nor rushing to soothe them. It was, he admitted, but also clarifying, I guess. She never really cared about me, just what I could give her. A pause, then a flash of insight that surprised me. Kind of like how I've treated you, actually. The moment of genuine self-reflection hung between us like a delicate soap bubble, fragile, iridescent with possibility, likely to burst at the slightest pressure. I acknowledged it with care. That's a powerful realization, Alexander. He nodded, running a hand through hair that was beginning to show the first strands of gray at the temples, physical evidence of middle age that contrasted sharply with his emotionally arrested development. I made a list, he said suddenly, tapping the notebook before him, of potential next steps, real options, not just waiting for you to solve everything. The admission seemed to cost him considerable effort. I could sell my car. It's worth something at least. Find a cheap apartment, maybe with roommates. Look for steady work instead of another big opportunity venture. The practical considerations that most adults would have automatically evaluated immediately after receiving an eviction notice had taken Alexander a month of crisis and confrontation to even consider. Yet I recognized the significance of him generating solutions rather than simply expecting rescue. Those sound like reasonable starting points, I encouraged, careful not to take over the planning process as I would have instinctively done in the past. I also, he hesitated, then continued with visible discomfort. I might need some help, not just money, but I don't actually know how to do a lot of things, basic things, like finding an apartment or applying for regular jobs or budgeting for normal expenses. The admission clearly cost him considerable pride, yet represented perhaps the most honest self-assessment I'd heard from him in decades. I'm willing to help you learn those skills, I said carefully, not by doing them for you, but by supporting you while you develop your own capabilities, like training wheels, he muttered, embarrassment coloring his features. At 42. Better at 42 than never, I offered gently. Many people need to develop new skills at various life stages. There's no shame in learning, only in refusing to try. We spent the next hour outlining practical next steps. A return flight to America scheduled for the following day. Arrangements for my financial support limited specifically to first and last month's rent on a modest apartment. Referrals to career counseling services that could help him identify sustainable employment options suited to his actual skills rather than his inflated self-perception. As our coffee cups emptied and the conversation wound toward conclusion, Alexander asked the question that had likely been simmering beneath the surface since his arrival in Santorini. Will you ever come back to the States? Or is this, he gestured vaguely toward the Aegean vista beyond our cafe table, permanent? This is my home now, I confirmed gently. I may visit occasionally, but Santorini is where I want to build the remainder of my life. He nodded, absorbing this reality with surprising equanimity compared to his initial reactions. Because of your art? The gallery exhibition? Partly, I acknowledged, but more fundamentally because this place represents a fresh start, a life based on my own choices rather than others' expectations or needs. At 70, that's a precious opportunity I never thought I'd have. Something shifted in his expression. Perhaps the first genuine recognition that I existed as a complete person, separate from my maternal role, with dreams and desires that had nothing to do with him. I never really knew you, he said quietly. Not as a person outside of being my mother. No, I agreed. You didn't try to know me that way, and I didn't insist on being known. As we parted outside the cafe, Alexander attempted an awkward hug, the first physical affection he'd initiated in years. I'll text when I get back, let you know about the apartment hunting. I'd like that, I said, meaning it, despite the complexities between us. Small steps, Alexander. That's how new patterns begin. Watching him walk away toward his hotel, I felt neither the crushing guilt I'd anticipated, nor the righteous satisfaction of teaching him a lesson. Instead, I experienced something more nuanced. Sadness for the years of unhealthy patterns we'd both participated in, hope for healthier interaction moving forward, and profound gratitude for the courage that had finally allowed me to reclaim my own life while offering him the opportunity to truly claim his. The path ahead remained uncertain. Alexander might revert to manipulation, once back in familiar territory. He might genuinely embrace this belated opportunity for growth. Most likely, our future would include elements of both, as decades of entrenched patterns couldn't transform overnight. But as I walked back to my villa, along cliffside paths warmed by afternoon sun, I felt a profound sense of peace with the boundaries I'd established and maintained despite lifelong conditioning to do otherwise. Whatever choices Alexander made moving forward would be his own, influenced by our past, certainly, but no longer dictated by my enablement or protection from natural consequences. For perhaps the first time in 40 years, we were both truly free to become our authentic selves. Hold your chin up slightly. Yes, perfect. The light captures your eyes beautifully that way. I smiled at the photographer from Aegean Arts Quarterly, still uncomfortable being the center of attention, but gradually adapting to my new public identity as an emerging artist. 3 months had passed since Alexander's visit to Santorini. 3 months of profound personal and professional growth as I fully embraced this unexpected third act of my life. The magazine feature was Elena's doing. After my exhibition at her gallery had drawn unexpected attention from both local collectors and international visitors, she had contacted cultural publications about the American widow who discovered her artistic voice at 70. The angle was admittedly sensationalized. I hadn't discovered my artistic voice so much as finally allowed it public expression after decades of secret creation. But the resulting publicity had created opportunities I'd never imagined possible. "I think we have everything we need, Mrs. Hartwell," the photographer said, reviewing images on his camera display. "The combination of your portraits with the Santorini backdrop tells a compelling visual story." Elena approached as the photography team packed their equipment. "The writer was impressed with your journey," she observed, "though I notice you edited certain family details from your narrative." I shrugged, offering her coffee on my favorite terrace now that the interview had concluded. "Some aspects of my story belong to others, as well as to me. I'm careful about what I share publicly." The truth was more complex than my diplomatic response suggested. I had deliberately minimized Alexander's role in my artistic emergence, describing my late-life transformation as a widow's self-discovery, rather than escape from an adult child's suffocating dependence. This wasn't merely to protect his privacy or pride, but to avoid defining my new life primarily in relation to old wounds. Elena understood without further explanation. At 62, she had navigated her own complex family dynamics while building her reputation in the Greek art world. "Your work stands on its own merit, regardless of the path that led here," she assured me, though the personal narrative certainly adds marketing appeal. We discussed upcoming projects as afternoon sunlight warmed the terrace. A possible collaboration with local ceramic artists, interest from an Athens gallery about a showing next spring, commission requests from collectors who had responded to my distinctive interpretation of Santorini's iconic landscapes. After Elena departed, I checked my phone to find several messages waiting, evidence of the expanding connections forming in my new life. An invitation to dinner from Kostas, the charming archaeology professor whose friendship had gradually evolved into something warmer over recent months. A reminder about tomorrow's meeting with the children's art program I'd begun funding at the local community center. A text from Marcus with photos of his family's recent vacation. And, somewhat surprisingly, an email from Alexander with the subject line, "Monthly Update, Progress Report." Our communication since his return to America had evolved into an unexpected pattern. Rather than the emotional manipulation or financial demands I'd anticipated, he had begun sending structured monthly updates, formal at first, gradually becoming more personal, detailing his efforts toward independence. The format had emerged organically after our conversations in Santorini, perhaps giving him a framework to maintain connection without reverting to old patterns. I opened his message with curiosity rather than the apprehension such communications had once triggered. "Mom, 3-month progress report, as promised. The job at Wilson Consulting continues to go reasonably well. Still an adjustment working in a structured environment with actual deadlines and accountability. Who knew, right? But my supervisor mentioned potential for advancement if I maintain current performance. The apartment is small but functional. Found a roommate situation that's working out surprisingly well. Guy named Trevor, 40, divorced, also rebuilding his life. We split expenses fairly, and he actually knows how to cook, which has been educational. Finances remain tight but manageable. Haven't asked you for additional support beyond our original agreement, which I consider personal progress worth noting. Actually created my first ever actual budget this month. Spreadsheets and everything. Marcus helped with the template, but I did the real work myself. Started seeing a therapist as you suggested. Only 3 sessions so far, but already having some uncomfortable realizations about patterns I've maintained. She keeps using phrases like arrested development and entitlement mentality, which sting, but aren't exactly inaccurate. Saw your gallery exhibition photos online. The paintings are extraordinary, Mom. I remember some of them from the attic studio, but never really looked at them before. There's one with a woman standing at a window that made me think about all the years you spent watching everyone else's lives while putting your own dreams on hold. I'm sorry I was part of that pattern for so long. Still working on building an actual adult life at 42, which is embarrassing but necessary. Some days are harder than others. Turns out real jobs don't offer the instant success my entrepreneurial ventures always promised but never delivered. Hope you're well. The villa looks incredible in those magazine interview photos. You look happy, different somehow. Alexander P.S. My therapist suggested I ask you about your life and interests rather than just reporting on my own situation, so how are you? What new paintings are you working on? Is Santorini still everything you hoped? I read the message twice, noting the significant evolution from his earlier communications. The acknowledgement of my artwork as valuable. The belated recognition of my sacrificed dreams. The awkward but genuine attempt to inquire about my life rather than centering himself. The admission of struggling with basic adult responsibilities without immediately demanding rescue. Small steps indeed, but meaningful ones. After consideration, I composed a response that neither overprized his progress nor ignored the genuine effort it represented. Dear Alexander, thank you for your update. I'm genuinely pleased to hear about your job stability and developing independent living skills. Learning to maintain a budget is particularly significant. It's a fundamental adult capability that will serve you well moving forward. I'm glad you've begun therapy. The initial realizations are often uncomfortable, but that discomfort typically signals important growth. Be patient with the process and with yourself. Thank you for your comments about my artwork. The painting you mentioned, Woman at Window, was created during a particularly difficult period after your father died. Art became my private sanctuary during those years when external obligations consumed most of my energy and attention. I don't regret the choices I made as a mother, but I am profoundly grateful for this opportunity to finally pursue my creative path fully. In answer to your questions, yes, Santorini continues to exceed my expectations. The quality of light here transforms throughout the day in ways that constantly inspire new work. I'm currently developing a series exploring the interplay between architectural structures and natural elements, how human creation and natural beauty can enhance rather than compete with each other. My exhibition has led to several exciting opportunities, including a feature in a regional arts publication and interest from galleries in Athens. I've also begun funding a children's art program locally, which brings me particular joy. Watching young people discover their creative capabilities without the self-consciousness that develops later reminds me why art matters fundamentally to human expression. I've made wonderful friends here, a community of both local residents and expatriates who share common interests and values. There's a particular gentleman, a retired archaeology professor, whose company I especially enjoy. Life continues to offer surprising possibilities at every age. I'm proud of the steps you're taking, Alexander. Building genuine independence is challenging, but ultimately far more rewarding than dependency could ever be, for both of us. With love, Mom. After sending the response, I moved to my studio to work on the latest canvas in my architectural series, a study of light filtering through a traditional Santorini doorway, illuminating interior shadows in unexpected ways. The metaphor wasn't lost on me as I mixed colors to capture that particular quality of revealed space. For decades, I had existed primarily in relation to others' needs and expectations, first as Robert's wife, then as Alexander's mother and caretaker. My identity had been defined by those relationships rather than by my own intrinsic qualities and capabilities. Now, at 70, I was finally stepping fully into the doorway, allowing light to illuminate aspects of myself long kept in shadow. The phone rang as I was cleaning brushes hours later, Marcus's name appearing on the screen. "I just got off the phone with Alexander," he said, after our initial greetings. "He actually called me for advice about investment planning, basic retirement account stuff. Nothing fancy, but still." Alexander voluntarily thinking about future financial stability. I nearly dropped the phone. I laughed, setting aside my painting supplies to give our conversation full attention. "He seems to be making genuine progress. His latest update mentioned budgeting and therapy." "Therapy was your most valuable parting gift," Marcus observed, though I'm sure he didn't see it that way initially. "How did he seem to you?" I asked, curious about my older son's perspective on his brother's evolution. "More grounded," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "Less grandiose. Still Alexander. He managed to work in complaints about his entry-level position despite being employed for the first time in years, but noticeably different. He actually asked about my kids without immediately steering the conversation back to himself. The observation aligned with the subtle shifts I'd noticed in Alexander's communications, tentative steps toward considering perspectives beyond his own immediate experience. "Do you think it will last?" I asked, voicing the concern that occasionally surfaced despite my determination to maintain appropriate boundaries regardless of his choices. "Hard to say," Marcus admitted. "Patterns established over 40 years don't transform overnight, but genuine necessity is a powerful motivator. Without you as a safety net, he's finally having to develop capabilities he should have mastered decades ago." After our call ended, I stepped onto my bedroom balcony to watch the sunset paint the caldera in spectacular colors, the daily natural masterpiece that still took my breath away months after moving to Santorini. In the distance, cruise ships dotted the horizon, tourists crowded popular viewing spots in Oya. Everyday life continued across the island that had become my home. My phone chimed with a message from Costas confirming our dinner plans with gentle humor that warmed me even through the digital medium. At 70, I had never expected to experience the particular pleasure of anticipating an evening with a man whose company I genuinely enjoyed, not as a caretaker or support system, but as a woman valued for her mind, creativity, and authentic self. As twilight deepened into evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The painful confrontation at my dining table when Alexander had told me to find another roof. The secret plans already in motion that had transformed apparent rejection into liberation. The courage required to finally prioritize my own dreams after decades of placing others' needs first. Most importantly, the recognition that establishing boundaries with Alexander had ultimately served us both, allowing me to reclaim my autonomy while forcing him to develop long overdue independence. Our relationship remained complex and still healing, but founded now on more honest footing than the enabling patterns I'd maintained for decades. Tomorrow would bring new paintings to create, friendships to nurture, experiences to embrace in this unexpected third act of my life. The path forward stretched before me not as an obligation to others' expectations, but as an open canvas awaiting my authentic creative expression, in art and in life itself. At 70, I had finally come home, not to a physical location, but to myself. To Sophia Hartwell, whose remarkable journey reminds us that it's never too late to claim the life we truly deserve. Glasses clinked around the elegant rooftop restaurant as Elena's toast was echoed by the gathered guests, fellow artists, gallery owners, local friends, and visitors who had traveled specifically for this occasion. 1 year to the day since my arrival in Santorini, we were celebrating not just the anniversary of my relocation, but the official opening of my second major exhibition, this one in Athens, representing a significant expansion of my artistic reach. The past 12 months had unfolded with a richness I could never have imagined while standing in my former dining room, absorbing Alexander's casual dismissal after 40 years of unconditional support. That painful moment, what had felt like rejection at the time, had ultimately become the catalyst for profound transformation. "Your work speaks to so many of us," continued Mariella, a prominent Athens gallery owner who had championed my inclusion in the prestigious exhibition. "The perspective of a woman who has lived fully, loved deeply, sacrificed much, and finally claimed her rightful artistic voice. It resonates across cultures and generations." I accepted the praise with a gracious nod, still adjusting to public recognition after decades of creating in secrecy. The exhibition had already generated significant sales and commission requests, transforming my artistic passion from private sanctuary to respected professional pursuit. At 71, I had achieved what many artists work a lifetime to accomplish, not through youth or connections or academic credentials, but through the authentic power of work created from lived experience. Costas's hand found mine beneath the table, his quiet support a steady presence through the evening's celebrations. Our relationship had evolved naturally over the past year, two independent spirits who had found unexpected connection in the third act of our lives. Neither of us sought to replicate earlier marriages or create dependent attachments. Instead, we shared experiences, perspectives, and companionship that enhanced rather than defined our individual journeys. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, as the dinner progressed to dessert and conversations flowed around us, contemplative behind the smile. "Anniversaries invite reflection," I replied, appreciating his perceptiveness. "I'm thinking about parallel moments, standing here celebrating artistic recognition versus where I was exactly 1 year ago. Packing to leave America," he nodded, familiar with my story. "Preparing to claim your freedom after decades of constraint." "Exactly. The contrast is overwhelming sometimes." Before he could respond, my phone vibrated with an incoming call, Marcus's ringtone, unexpected given the time difference. I excused myself to step away from the festivities, finding a quiet corner of the restaurant's terrace to answer. "Is everything all right?" I asked immediately, concern flaring at the unusual timing. "Everything's fine," he assured me quickly. "Great, actually. I just couldn't wait to share the news. Alexander got the promotion at work." "The management position?" I clarified, recalling mentions of this possibility in recent updates. "That's wonderful. Senior account manager," Marcus confirmed, obvious pride in his voice, with a significant salary increase and actual responsibility for a client portfolio. They specifically cited his improved reliability and organizational skills as factors in the decision. The news settled warmly in my chest, genuine pleasure untainted by the complicated dynamic that had characterized my relationship with Alexander for so long. "He's worked hard for this. 15 months of consistent employment is his longest stretch since college. It's more than the job stability," Marcus continued. "He called me first with the news, Mom. Not to brag, but to thank me for the reference that helped him get the initial position. Actual expressed gratitude, acknowledging someone else's role in his success. I nearly fell out of my chair." I laughed softly, understanding his surprise. The Alexander of 2 years ago would have claimed full credit for any achievement, dismissing others' contributions as insignificant compared to his own innate talents. This acknowledgement of interdependence, of benefiting from others' support while still claiming appropriate personal responsibility, represented significant emotional maturation. "He wants to tell you himself," Marcus added. "Said he'd call tomorrow when you're not at your exhibition event. I just couldn't wait to share the progress report." After ending the call, I remained at the terrace railing for a few moments, absorbing the Mediterranean night and the emotional significance of Alexander's continued evolution. Our relationship had transformed substantially over the past year, finding a new equilibrium that honored both his growth toward independence and my reclaimed autonomy. The monthly progress reports had gradually shifted from formal accountability measures to more genuine communication. He still occasionally tested boundaries, hints about financial pressures or veiled suggestions that visits to Santorini would be easier if I covered travel expenses, but accepted my consistent redirection with increasing maturity. Most significantly, he had begun showing interest in my life and creative work, asking questions about paintings or exhibition preparations without immediately steering conversations back to his own concerns. Small steps by normal relationship standards, but meaningful progress given our starting point. "Good news from home?" Costas asked, joining me at the railing with 2 glasses of champagne. "Alexander received a promotion," I confirmed, accepting the offered glass. "Significant recognition of his professional development. You're pleased for him, but also somewhat surprised," he observed with characteristic perception. I nodded, appreciating his ability to read emotional nuance. A year ago, I wouldn't have believed this possible. His pattern was always enthusiastic beginnings, followed by abandonment when sustained effort was required. People can change when necessity demands it, Costas noted, though it typically requires a catalyst, something that makes familiar patterns unsustainable. Like suddenly discovering your childhood home has been sold and your mother has relocated to Greece with the proceeds, I suggested with rueful humor. Precisely that kind of catalyst, he agreed, eyes crinkling with warmth, though the change that follows must come from within. Your boundaries created the opportunity, but his response to those boundaries was his own choice. We rejoined the celebration, where conversations flowed easily among the diverse gathering. Local fishermen's wives who had become friends during my daily walks, expatriate artists who had welcomed me into their community, gallery owners discussing upcoming exhibitions, tourists who had stumbled upon my work and been sufficiently moved to attend this event. Elena approached as the evening wound toward conclusion, her professional satisfaction evident in her relaxed demeanor. The Athens exhibition is already receiving excellent press. 3 more paintings sold during dinner, including Woman at Window. Your collector from New York was quite insistent. The news brought mixed emotions. That particular painting, created during dark days after Robert's death, when art had been my only emotional outlet, carried profound personal significance. Yet its resonance with the collector suggested it had successfully communicated the complex emotions embedded in its creation, fulfilling the essential purpose of art. She mentioned being moved by the tension between confinement and possibility. Elena continued, sensing my ambivalence, said it perfectly captured her own experience of balancing family obligations with personal aspiration. Then it found the right home, I acknowledged. Art should live where it speaks most powerfully. As guests gradually departed with warm embraces and promises of future connections, I found myself standing at the terrace edge with Costas, overlooking the Santorini caldera illuminated by moonlight. The vista that had first captured my imagination in property photographs had become the backdrop to my daily life, no longer an escapist fantasy, but the setting for authentic self-realization. "What are you thinking?" Costas asked, comfortable with my contemplative silences, but genuinely interested in their content. "About parallel lives," I replied honestly. If Alexander hadn't told me to find another roof that night, if I hadn't already been secretly planning my escape, I might still be in that house, still enabling his dependence, still creating art only in hidden moments stolen from others' needs. "Do you regret not making this change sooner?" The question deserved thoughtful consideration rather than reflexive response. "I regret the years of artistic expression I sacrificed," I acknowledged, "but I don't regret the mother I was to both my sons, even with the mistakes I made. Every choice I made then shaped who I am now, including the woman who finally found the courage to choose herself. And that woman is quite extraordinary," he observed, his admiration warming me more effectively than the evening breeze off the Aegean. The following morning, I woke early as had become my habit, drawn to the eastern terrace to watch sunrise illuminate the caldera in breathtaking transformation. My phone showed a text sent hours earlier. Alexander, apparently messaging immediately after receiving news of his promotion despite the time difference. "Got the management position. Official announcement tomorrow. Better salary, actual responsibility, business cards with my name spelled correctly. Real adult stuff. Wanted you to know. We'll call later. Hope the exhibition is going well. P.S. Trevor says to tell you the budget spreadsheet system you suggested is life-changing for 2 formerly financially clueless bachelors." I smiled at the enthusiastic tone and the small evidence of continued practical progress. The reference to my suggested organizational system, a simple household budget template I'd shared months earlier, represented something significant. Alexander accepting guidance rather than resenting it, acknowledging my competence in areas where he still needed development. Later that morning, as I prepared for meetings related to the Athens exhibition, my phone rang with Alexander's call. "Congratulations on the promotion," I said warmly after initial greetings. "That's significant recognition of your professional growth." "Thanks," he replied, his voice carrying genuine pride, untainted by the grandiose claims that would have characterized similar conversations in the past. "It's actually terrifying and exciting at the same time. People will be depending on my decisions, actual consequences if I mess up. You're ready for that responsibility," I assured him, meaning it. You've been building the necessary skills consistently. That's really good to hear you say. The simple acknowledgement held unexpected emotion. Listen, I've been thinking about something. The exhibition in Athens. I've seen the online previews. It looks incredible, Mom. Thank you. The response has been quite overwhelming. I'd like to see it in person, he continued with uncharacteristic hesitation. With the new position and salary, I could actually afford the trip myself. No expectations about staying with you or anything. Just, I'd like to see your work as it's meant to be seen, to understand that part of you better. The request, framed as a genuine desire to understand me rather than an entitled expectation, caught me by surprise. I'd like that, I replied honestly. The exhibition runs for 6 weeks. You'd be welcome to visit. Really? His tone suggested he'd anticipated refusal, revealing lingering uncertainty about our evolving relationship boundaries. I'd really like that. We discussed potential timing and practical arrangements, the conversation maintaining a respectful balance that would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier. No manipulation, no unstated expectations, no assumption that my resources or home would automatically be available for his convenience. After we disconnected, I stepped into my studio, the light-filled space that had witnessed my artistic rebirth over the past year. Canvases in various stages of completion lined the walls, each representing aspects of my evolving perspective on Santorini, on aging, on claiming personal power after decades of self-abnegation. The latest series, Thresholds, explored transitions between confined and open spaces, playing with light and shadow to evoke the emotional experience of crossing significant life boundaries. The canvas currently on my easel depicted a figure moving from a darkened interior toward a sun-drenched doorway, neither fully in shadow nor completely in light, but in the dynamic moment of transition itself. My phone chimed with a message from Marcus, a family photo taken at his daughter's recent piano recital, casual happiness evident in their relaxed postures and genuine smiles. Another chime followed immediately, Costas confirming our plans to visit an archaeological site on a neighboring island the following weekend. A third notification appeared, Elena with updated sales figures from the exhibition opening. Each message represented a different facet of my current life, family connections maintained across distance, new relationship developing with appropriate independence, professional recognition after decades of hidden creativity. The full tapestry of an existence I could never have imagined while standing in my former dining room, absorbing the shock of Alexander's callous dismissal. Find another roof to live under. The words that had initially felt like rejection had ultimately become liberation. The final push needed to break patterns established over 40 years of maternal self-sacrifice. The painful confrontation had catalyzed transformation not just for me, but ultimately for Alexander as well, forcing both of us to develop healthier ways of relating to ourselves and each other. As afternoon sunlight streamed through my studio windows, illuminating the canvas before me, I added subtle highlights to the threshold figure, not completing the transition, but capturing the dynamic potential of that pivotal moment between past and future, between limitation and possibility. At 71, I had finally claimed the life I deserved, not by abandoning maternal love or responsibility, but by recognizing that true love sometimes requires establishing boundaries that foster growth rather than dependence. The villa surrounding me, purchased with proceeds from the house where I'd sublimated my own dreams for decades, wasn't merely luxurious shelter, but physical manifestation of reclaimed selfhood. The journey had been neither simple nor painless. Establishing boundaries after a lifetime of accommodation had required courage I wasn't always certain I possessed. Watching Alexander struggle with consequences had triggered maternal instincts to protect and rescue that I'd needed to consciously resist. Building a new life in Santorini had demanded willingness to risk failure and rejection at an age when many retreat into familiar limitations. Yet here I stood, brush in hand, Mediterranean light streaming through windows, creative energy flowing unimpeded by others' demands or expectations. The woman who had once been defined primarily through service to others had emerged as an artist, a friend, a lover, a community member, a self-directed human being, claiming her rightful place in the world, not despite my age, but because of it, carrying the wisdom, perspective, and hard-won self-knowledge that 7 decades of life experience had provided. Outside my studio windows, Santorini stretched in whitewashed beauty against the deep blue Aegean. My villa, my home, my sanctuary, my declaration of independence, perched on the caldera's edge as physical manifestation of the most profound truth I'd finally embraced. It is never too late to claim the life you deserve.